Call to order the Timberlane Regional School District Budget Committee meeting at 7:04 PM. We have a call to roll.
Alan David,
Here?
Eileen Doobie.
Here.
Lee Doobie.
Here.
David Burns,
Here.
Dan Guy,
Here.
Julie Hammond,
Here.
John Hughes,
Here.
Michael Mascola,
Here.
Sean O'Neill,
Here.
Jim Paul.
Here.
Also seated at the committee table are Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Ed Lexler, and Business Administrator, Dr. Allen.
Mr. O'Neill, would you lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First order of business is to review the minutes from November 9th meeting. Any omissions or corrections? I'll entertain a motion to accept the minutes as presented.
So made.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
I'm abstaining.
And any abstentions? Okay, the correspondence folder is going around. We received at the late this afternoon, 2 emails. Is that folder?
It's all the way down here, it made its way all the way down.
Let me just get it back here. You can get it.
We'll pass it back and we'll go back that way,
Okay.
then you'll have it at the end.
Perfect.
Okay. We will, while that's going around, I'd like to invite Mr. Boyle to come and speak. Do it together?
Come up together, yes.
Sure.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing us to speak here tonight. But I'm the chairman of the school board. Dr. Farrer is the vice chair. We just wanted to come down tonight and as you people have obviously, like ourselves, you received your full budget today. As did I have not had the opportunity yet to review it. The school board, as has been pointed out before in previous meetings. Obviously, the school board, we're responsible for the default budget. This board is responsible for the proposed budget, and then after you people deliberated, as we all know, you'll go in front of deliberative session, and that budget can go up or down in deliberative session. I've come in front of this board here tonight because we've had, several meetings with the superintendent, and we're trying to work on what our board does. Our board proposed unofficially, I polled the board approximately 6 weeks ago. It was a close vote, but still by a 5-4 margin, the school board's goal was to lower the operating budget by 3%, which is $2 million. Was a goal of the school board. I'm hoping tonight, Mr. Gerns, that whenever you have the opportunity to do it, I hope that you get the opportunity and make the opportunity to poll your board to get a sense of where your board would like to go, because I believe as of right now, this is the first time you've actually seen the full operating budget in its entirety. I know you've had several meetings. I know you've gone through with different principals and department heads, but now I believe for the first time you're seeing it in its entirety. So I hope that you follow suit, if you will, and that way the superintendent would receive some sort of direction how he can proceed. I'm well aware of what your responsibilities are versus our responsibilities. We're down here tonight. We're here to work with the Budget Committee. We're not in here to try to usurp anyone's authority. So I just wanted to, reach out to you people and say, because right now we're probably halfway through the season, even though we're 24 hours away from Turkey Day. So you guys have quite a bit of work to look at, a budget that is up, and I'm sure this is just the first draft. I know that Timberlane has it's got, I guess it's some people in this room have been party to it in the past. Timberlane has a unique way of starting with these high budgets, and then they come back in a couple of weeks, lowering. There seems to be a back and forth how they seem to do it. If that's how you're going to do it, that's fine. It seems like a lot of work, but I just want to let you guys know that we're here. Obviously, we're a very fiscally conscious school board. So we're all here to represent our constituents. We have our 4 towns. We have 4 towns of taxpayers, and obviously we're all here about the students. But I just want to reach out to you guys and let you know that we're here to support you. And then I hope that sometime tonight, I'm hoping that you can get a flavor of your board, what's going on, because obviously this is your board. Thanks. That's it.
Thank you very much.
Enjoy your meeting.
Okay, we have some unfinished business to take care of first. The Sandown schools, both Sandown North and Sandown Central, was tabled for 2 meetings ago because of the discussion concerning how these schools would be structured in the future. And Mr. Guy, if you could explain what the outcome of that discussion is?
So the superintendent's leadership team brought forth to us their recommendation of keeping these schools as is currently. They're not gonna separate any grades in the foreseeable future for 2 years, maybe 3, depending on what happens. So both schools will be open, both schools will house students.
Okay, I'd like to take the Sandown North proposed budget off the table for discussion. Is there any issues or concerns about the Sandown North budget as it was presented by the principal? Yes?
I do.
Yes.
There was, as part of the capital improvement thing, was $20,000 for signage there.
North? I thought that was for Central.
Sorry.
For Central.
You're right. You said north, I heard central,
Okay.
so I don't.
Okay, yes,
I just had one question on the summary of the proposed budget for Sandown North. Down at the bottom, it had down the additional playground equipment. Does that change anything with leaving everything as is? Is that still a needed thing, or is that, it was for the additional playground equipment of 10,000?
So that looks like it's in there to build the money up to buy playground equipment, because it's in there, it looks like for a total of 3 years.
Okay,
I think, I don't know, I don't have the whole CIP in front of me. I don't think it was to purchase Sandown equipment this year, or I should say next year. It was to build up money to be able to purchase equipment.
okay,
Kinda like the other schools did, the same thing.
okay,
So, that's what that's for.
okay.
Mr. Messer?
I think your question was, does the fact that the school board took a vote to not change anything, that plan was not part of any kind of change? So that
Right.
was part of the business that we currently do. So that's equipment for the kids that are currently there.
Okay,
And it's similar to what Atkinson and Danville and Plastow have done with their elementary schools.
Right.
So I think that was your question,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Does the vote change with the plan, and it doesn't?
okay. Thank you.
Any other questions or concerns with the budget as presented by the principal of Sandown North? I make a motion then to accept this budget of $107,783 for Sandown North, and take it under advisement.
Second.
Second. Any other discussion? All in favor? Opposed? One. Abstentions? Okay. Moving on next to Sandown Central. Are there any questions on their proposed budget?
Now that we're on the right school.
Yes.
The 20,000 for the sign, I think it's an awful lot for some signage for the school. I know there's a number of boys coming up for Eagle Scouts. I think that's something that could be done through an Eagle Scout project or other means, but I think definitely you can get it done for less than 20 grand.
You want to make a motion?
Yeah, it's on the capital improvement, right? Yep.
Yes.
So there was a portion of that was, I believe, to run electrical and
Yeah.
underlying infrastructure to put it in a more convenient location as well, so it's not just the sign.
Yeah, and I thought about the lighting as well, and I'm thinking, how often is the school visited after dark, right? So yes, this time of year, maybe a few times a year. I don't know that the electrical serves a huge purpose, just my opinion. So I'm gonna motion that we remove request FACS-0018 for $20,000.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Any more discussion? Yeah, we'll call for a vote. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. Any other issues concerning Sandown Central in their budget? Yes,
I would like to make a motion to remove 4 items for Sandown Central that are on that CIP summary, going from the FACB 0046, FACB 0047, FACB 0048, and FACB 0050.
Any,
I'll second it for discussion, because I have
Yes.
some questions.
yes,
I agree with you on some of those, not all of those. I'd feel more comfortable if you withdrew and made individual motions.
Okay. Okay. So I'll start with making a motion to remove FACB 0046, the replacement of art cabinets and sinks.
okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, okay. Discussion? You want,
I think that since we're leaving things as they are until we have the strategic plan and we really see what we're going to be doing, I don't see the point in making upgrades over there at this point.
okay. Any other discussions? Yes,
So I understand, didn't we just say that it could be a couple of years out to figure out what we're doing with Sandhill Central?
yes.
So the question is spending this money possibly in the short term, right?
Right.
If I can get a clarification, this entire $1.9 million of all of these CIP items are reflected in the current first draft of the budget with all of them being included?
They're all included, however, to the extent that we've already removed some in this committee, those are removed in the budget.
Yeah,
So, yeah, so it'll reflect on what was included on the
the bottom,
Budget committee
one
approved as of-
point three eight four.
1.3, yes, okay.
So would,
Thank you.
it would be safe to say that a reduction of whatever amount is gonna be a 1-for-1 on the final budget.
Any other questions or comments? Get call for a vote. All in favor of the motion to remove FACB 0046 from the CIP for this year? Opposed? Okay. Julie, you want
Yep.
next one?
Moving on, I might need some clarification because I can't quite remember what the upgrading of the building management system is. I don't know if that's a phone system or what exactly that,
Alarm panels, HVAC monitoring,
okay. So
that's why I asked you to split
does
it up.
that
That's the
work,
one.
is it working what we have right now? Why are we upgrading it?
So it would be to have our systems digitized so that we know when there is a system that is not working, gone down, easier to diagnose. It creates energy efficiency in the system, being able to have our energy managed potentially remotely, certainly even within the building. It helps us to be able to regulate what the temperatures are in the respective areas of the building, classrooms, that sort of thing. A lot of our buildings right now are upfitted with that capability, and in terms of there being an issue, it can be handled and diagnosed even remotely. So really, we're bringing a lot of our systems now, a lot of our HVAC systems onto that model. And this is the next school up for that.
Okay.
So help me understand, if you don't mind,
Mhm.
what we would be, what is the major downside to pushing that off for another year?
I think you
Or
miss-
is there a cost savings that we're actually missing out on? What does that ROI look like?
I couldn't tell you with certainty and with precision as to what that cost savings would be.
I'll take a
I
ballparkish.
I couldn't,
I mean, are we saying that, is it $100, $1,000, $10,000 that we're talking
I
about?
think it comes down to how many times the systems fail,
Yeah.
right? So with the building management system, if the system fails, you can remotely diagnose
Right.
and determine whether or not you need to dispatch a technician or not. And that may be, correct me if I'm wrong, a district employee or
That's
a
correct.
vendor. So if the system fails 0 times in the year, well, the $25,000, you didn't realize an ROI. If the system fails 5 times, you're probably gonna recognize some savings there.
we've had some success in the district utilizing these types of systems to be able to identify, we have an area of the building that's hot, is there a gate that's failed, or what has happened to cause that? And it's also given us the ability to remotely monitor, which means that we can have a little bit more control over making sure that the heat's not on when it shouldn't be on, or that it's on when it's optimal to do so.
What are these schools left that have to have that done?
I do not have that information on the top of my head. I believe Pollard has been completed. I believe a number of schools have been completed. I believe maybe the middle school might be one that we're waiting to complete. We have a very large system there, but I think that we've implemented some form of this in all of our other buildings.
This is the last one, I think.
Right, that's what I thought as well.
Yep,
Yeah, I think it's the last one.
it's proven to be a great tool, I'll put it that way. Cost savings, with the benefit of being able to have your HVAC on at optimal times, being able to identify and diagnose remotely, being able to dispatch to a specific area of the building to identify where a problem may be. That leads to downstream energy, hopefully energy and cost savings.
Is any part of the equipment on this line portable, meaning if Sandown Central was to go away, that they can extract the parts and maybe use them elsewhere in our district? Do we know that?
I don't know.
Or is it mostly a service of installation?
It's specific a lot of times to that building's current system. So it's a system that's compliant with what that building is already using. Could we utilize it somewhere else? Perhaps, but we may already have another management system in that building, and it may be of a different size or a different scale or a different scope. I don't think that it's as portable as, let's say, a sign, which you leave and just take it with you.
Any other questions on this issue? What would you like to do, Mrs. Hammond?
I'm going to leave that one right now. If I could go on to FACB 0048, the restroom renovations.
What would-
Like to see that removed from the CIP plan or pushed out another year.
Okay, is that a motion to push out?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Yes,
I'll second that
I'll second.
for discussion, but I have questions after her.
Go ahead.
You made the motion, do you have any?
Just basically the same reason why I'm suggesting we hold off on replacing the cabinets and sinks as well.
Go ahead.
I'm trying to remember. There was one of the schools that they mentioned they didn't have a restroom facility
For the teachers.
for the teachers, and it was off of the conference room. Is this the
This
one we're
is,
talking about?
This is the
that's this
school.
one.
No, that's Sandown North.
Sandown North.
That's
That's
not.
the other restroom, that's not this one.
Yeah.
So this would be a restroom for the students?
That's right.
Yep.
Yep.
This
The
is to put in
renovations.
smaller toilets for the small.
Lower-
Oh, okay,
lower
that's what it
toilets
was.
for the
Yes,
boys.
to make smaller ones, yes.
Oops.
Any other questions or comments? Yes,
Yeah, so now that I'm getting my bearings on which school this was, think carefully, because this one's now a liability. We had little kids stepping on like milk crates
that's right.
to reach the bathrooms. One slip and fall.
Yeah, This was her concern at the tour.
I hear you 100%.
Well, most,
So the
you go
urinals-
into most public places, they don't have smaller restroom facilities for kids.
It's usually
I've
one
been in-
lower and one higher.
I've been in preschools and kindergartens that the bathrooms are all the same, they're for adults.
Well, let me back up. So either way, we have youngsters stepping on a platform, doing a balancing act with their pants at their ankles. If they fall. And I'm not a fan of spending money in a building that may not be there.
But I think, it's a safety, I think it is a safety issue. Because I think part of the renovation was also because we're dealing with special ed in that facility. Am I in the wrong place? My church wrong pew?
No, you're in the right place.
Yeah.
Here.
Yep.
So, a lot of times the teachers have to help the kids. And so I think there was also, but it was mainly the fact that the way the principal emphasized was the fact that they had to use boosters for them to get at the toilets.
Was this 32,000 to do 100% of the bathrooms?
Well, again, I want to paint an accurate picture, right? This is not every toilet, every kid, all day long, right? So Mrs. Hammond is correct. These are toilets, there are toilets like the toilets you have in your homes, like they use in their homes. There are urinals, some are higher, some are lower. You've toured the building, this was not an issue when we, for the last several years, this is just brought up, this particular year. So I don't want to paint a picture of this urgency and it's unsafe and all, because that's not accurate. It's not accurate. Are there some toiletry issues that we have? Do some kids need help? Of course they do. Some of them are special ed, some of them are kids that are being potty trained, et cetera. So I think there are issues, but I don't want to paint the picture that this is an unsafe place for kids to use the bathroom. That's not accurate. It's not accurate.
So could you help me understand then what the issue is if you don't feel it's safety?
This issue is
Yeah, yeah.
they want to bring everything down to really low.
I understand that, but you said safety isn't the issue, so it's just convenience is?
Well, no, in some instances, if they're using a toilet that's higher on the wall and they could, then that would be a safety issue. But it's not the only option for toilets there. Right? We're painting a picture like they can't use any of the toilets without standing on milk crates, and that's not accurate. It's not accurate. So they shouldn't be using, and they should be strategic about the toilets they use. And but this is a renovation, so if this was something that you wanted to entertain, that's the cost to bring everything down. We've made modifications at our other schools for students if things were too high, door handles, light switches, those sorts of things for different reasons. We've made those modifications, so it's not unusual for some of the modifications or some of the things that teachers and staff need to do in order for kids to access not just the toilets but other things as well.
Paul?
My question has to do with when the decision was made to put the smaller kids in that location from the fourth and fifth graders, when that whole thing happened. What was the plan? Was there any plan to have renovations at that time when it changed the scope of the building, I guess is my question.
Yeah, the Sandown Consolidation Committee made recommendations about hooks that were too high and those sorts of things.
I saw them lowered. Yeah.
I don't recall this conversation at that time during the recommendations, because we did a lot in both buildings
Right.
to modify them at the time. And so this was just something that ended up in the CIP this year, which I was surprised when I saw it, and then I listened to the conversation, and it was, like I said, I think it starts to paint a picture that's not entirely accurate. Those of you that have toured the building
Right.
know, right?
May I follow up?
Yeah.
See, my concern is that, we're not, because we don't have a strategic plan, we don't have a long-term, do we have a long-term need for the facility upgrade? Is it gonna be permanent? Are we gonna change the scope of the building and how it's used? For example, let's say Sandown blows up and the North School, and we go through another change of, let's say we move all the smaller children to the north and we bring the fourth and fifth graders back to the central school. Now you've gotta renovate what you've just renovated. I guess that's my concern.
No, that's a valid concern. If I could follow up to Mr. Paul, and I'll apologize to Ms. Sherman in advance of this, right? So it's something that you heard me say at the school board meeting, in a sense, right? So without a strategic plan, we're asking administrators to guess what might be in a plan that hasn't been created yet, right? And I apologize for the wish list, but these are things that they had hoped for that may or may not end up in a strategic plan. So that has made it a bit tricky for staff to put in requests for the CIP, because there's no plan, there's no long-term planning, like you said, so they're literally just going through their building and looking for, wow, this would be great if we could do this, and this would be great if we could do that, and they ended up in here. And we want to support that, but when you're looking at a budget and you're looking at these numbers, certain things are things that you have to discuss, because they don't really fit in that bottom line number, if that number's too high. And this would be an example of that, so that's a perfect,
Right.
you're spot on with that.
Okay.
You raised a great point. So I was on the consolidation committee, and I don't remember us ever talking about bathrooms. And thinking back now about the facilities, I don't think the bathrooms are any different at North, where those children used to be housed.
Right, but you're talking about 10 years ago, it was 1 through 5, before North was built. And what I'm saying is, the transition for the bigger kids to stay there wouldn't have been an issue.
No, I'm talking the bathrooms, the
That's what I'm getting
configurations and
at.
layout are any different between the two schools. And the younger kids were in North.
Okay? How high are the toilets for the, let's say you have a wing that has the younger kids, how high are the toilets versus the kids in fourth and fifth grade?
They're no different.
No. Okay. I can tell you from an ex-elementary principal, then that's an issue from a planning standpoint, because you have a kid sitting on a toilet with the little feet going like this, and not with their feet on the floor. From just a purely safety standpoint, I'd have an issue with that if I were principal. And I know that's why, where that's motivated from, to make it a safe spot for that child to go to the bathroom. That's all.
Yes.
I just had a question. Are there currently any lower toilets over at Sandown Central?
See, now we're into an arbitrary thing, like what's lower? You know, are there smaller toilets?
Are there smaller
Are there
ones?
age-appropriate
Are there
places for
some,
kids to go
are
to
there
the bathroom?
some smaller, are they all the same size? I
Yeah,
don't
didn't measure
remember.
them. You know, they've been using them for several years. I didn't hear a single word about it until this year.
Okay.
So, to your question, you know, should we get over there with a measuring tape and say, these are 12 inches off the floor, these are 14 inches off the floor? We haven't done that, but, you know, in terms of the urinals, you know, you've toured the building, that's not something, it's something I think I would have picked up on, or at least someone would have brought to my attention prior to this planning season.
So that's what I'm trying to get at. Is it a wish list
Yep.
of making it better and more conducive, or is it a safety issue? I guess that, with a point of clarification, I would like to
Yeah,
have.
well, let me just throw out a compliment to, you know, not a knock, you know, Mr. Rolfe did a great job being the principal there, and he's been around for a long time, so he just made things work. You hire a new principal, you remember when you're a new principal, what's your first thing? You go through your building and you look at anything and everything you can to make that place better.
Right.
And I wanna throw that out for Jen Marino, our new principal there, you know, maybe it's paint, maybe it's, different ways to do the bulletin boards, those sorts of things, and she's done a great job, if you walk through there, to brighten the place up and bring some life to it. So I would say this was one of those things that she noticed as a brand-new principal, that this is something I'd like to have for my kids. So I applaud that, but at the same point, we're trying to make, you know, these numbers fit, and we're also trying to plan long-term. We're trying to fit things into a plan that doesn't exist yet, which is very tricky. Because if we make decisions, if we spend money on things that are irreversible or can't be used in another way, that's not really all that prudent in terms of this plan.
It's not.
Yes.
So, 100% understand where you're coming from. I will say that having toured the schools, I saw milk crates that kids would be standing on to use the urinals. So we either have to figure out another way or make a renovation, in my opinion, because it is a safety issue, I think. So, you know, I'm not saying necessarily we keep this here, but we gotta find another solution.
Any more discussions on this? Right. There's a motion on the floor to, on FACB 0048, to remove $32,000 from the CIP. It's been moved and seconded. Any more discussions? All in favor of the motion? Can I see your hands again? Eight. Opposed? Two. Abstentions? One.
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to ask the superintendent if he could take that as an action item in terms of following up on the safety aspects. Please.
Ms. Salmon, do you have another?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to remove FACB 0050, the installation of classroom observation windows.
Second?
Discussion, yes.
Just refresh my memory. So I was there. What are these observation windows?
They wanted to put these windows in so that somebody, either maybe if there was a teacher and student in training, or a doctor, a therapist, or someone who wanted to look into the classroom without
yes, yes,
disrupting the
okay.
classroom.
So also prospective parents that may be interested in the
Oh,
program.
right, so they're
See
not
how the,
walking into the class and, everybody gets all
Special
distracted.
needs students and the regular ed students, how they interact in the classroom without disrupting the natural interactions that would take place.
Right.
Got it.
And I'm just suggesting that we remove it since, like, once again, we don't really know what our long-term plan is here.
Any other comments, questions, concerns? Okay, there's a motion on the floor for to remove from FACB 0050, $15,000 for classroom observation windows. All in favor? Unanimous. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. Okay, any other issues concerning Sandown Central? Yes?
Jeff, could you briefly explain why in 2017 they overspent their budget by $30,000?
Sandown Central,
Central, yeah.
they were under budgeted in that, let me just pull up the report and make sure I have that.
If there's anything major, just hit it. I mean,
They were, they had more expenses in there than they had budgeted. Supplies, general elementary, they were a bit over there. I don't know if there was any, huge compelling factor aside from the fact that program grew a lot more than was budgeted in that budget year alone. So you're looking at the 17 budget, 17 spend.
right,
Yeah.
right.
They had a lot more students I think than they had anticipated. That continues to be the trend.
It was also, if I could, just jump in there, so it was a bit of a moving target for Mr. Rolfe as he tried to budget when the budgets were different. And so they didn't have a budget for a year, and then with Principal George, and they were trying to figure things out. So it wasn't like he had a long history of years to know what to budget for and how to budget. They needed a sound system in there that they needed some items that I know that they purchased in the last year. So I know it was a struggle for him and Joanne trying to figure out grade configurations changed and what money went where in terms of staffing. So that may have been a factor in terms of the overspend. I don't know what Sandown North's, I don't have that in front of me, what it looked like, but that may be something to look at. If they underspent theirs, that may be some of the explanation.
Well, I think that's part of it, and then you also had multiple programs in that school as well.
Now, those of you that know Principal Georgian, she's incredibly cooperative and a team player. So when Mr. Rolfe needed things that he didn't have in his budget because he didn't have a history to budget, she was great about helping him out, especially when they were for materials and those sorts of things.
So North underspent 15,000 that year. Central was over 30,000, but it was new equipment. It was that transition.
Okay. Any other questions or concerns on Sandown Central? I make a motion that we accept for, under advisement, the budget as amended for Sandown Central.
Second.
Any other questions or concerns, discussions? Okay, all in favor of the amended budget for Sandown Central? Opposed? Looks like it's unanimous. Okay,
Mr. Gertz, before you
Yes.
get off the Sandown, so to Ms. Stubbe's point, what we'll do, let me get down to Sandown Central and figure out just how often, how many, and if we're looking for a solution and one doesn't exist, I would like you to, reserve the right to revisit this in the event that there is no other solution, if it's scores of kids. I'm not talking about one or two where we may have seen a milk crate because we were going through, but if there's scores of kids that have to do this, and that's what we're able to find out, you just reserve the right to revisit it as a committee. Yeah, fair enough, unless there's some other solution.
Yeah, maybe even it's just risers.
Yeah, I mean, we'll look at, I'll have, Tom Gary down there, and we'll see. But I don't like the idea at all either.
Yeah.
If it was an individual case and part of a modification for one student that the parents liked, and that's what they did at home, or two, but if there are a lot of kids doing this, then I agree with you, we need to do something else, and so, just, we'll bring that back to you at your next meeting. We should be able to take care of that between now and maybe the 30th. You meet again on the 30th, right? Yeah, so,
Thank you
I'll
very
have an
much.
explanation for you.
Appreciate that.
Moving on to business operations. The budget was put tabled because we were working with, or discussing about the conversion to fiber optic from T1 lines. And although the cabling is handled elsewhere, the issue was the equipment that needs to be in each of the schools to make the system work. There was a proposal for, a request for $210,000 to pay for it, to buy it. Issues was raised about leasing. Leasing has been investigated. If we were to do a 3-year lease for the schools, each year would be $75,981.68 for each of 3 years. If we were to go to a 5-year lease, it would be $47,284.09. So, Mr. David, you were concerned, raised the issue about leasing. Would you what do you want to do? You want to stay with the purchase, or you want to make a,
Well, it's kind of, I mean, basically leasing is a cash flow thing, so at this point, I think we're better off buying it if we're gonna go forward, because of the cash flow.
You guys actually asked me to ask the, school board for their opinion, and their opinion was to fund it fully.
yes,
And my actual question, was it a policy?
There's no policy.
So that's an open-ended, we can go either way. That was the other
Right.
point. I don't want the public to hear that we're going one
Nope,
way.
there's-
There are
there's-
two options.
Their recommendation was to fund it fully, and I emphasized to them that they also can decide to lease it too, even if it's funded fully, you know what I mean? Like, they still have that
Absolutely.
option, we can't make this, it's not a decision that's gonna be made until July, until it's,
Right.
and that's if it passes through the voters in March, right? So, they felt better by having it funded fully in terms of getting the grant and stuff like that, so.
all right, yes, I'll make a motion, I'll make a motion.
I just had,
Yes,
sorry, excuse me, I just had one other question on that.
yep.
Regarding the grant portion of that, do we have any more information regarding the time frame on that? Is there somebody working on that?
Yeah, that's down the road. I think what I would prefer, what I'd like to do, what I was gonna motion is that we include the $210,000 in the budget and charge the administration to seek out any and all grants to help fund it. Because it's gonna take a few months to work through that. Yes.
And there were two potential grants. One was reimbursement through E-rate funding, as well as a more recent grant introduced by the state, relating to some surplus for security and technology.
So, I want
Okay.
to state the obvious, just in case people are wondering, we have to budget for the full amount, even if we get grants, and the grant, that becomes revenue. Right, so you budget for the 218, whatever, it's 264, and say we got $150,000, that just would go into revenue, which could potentially.
As an offset to.
It's an offset.
Offset,
Yeah.
yeah. I don't know if everybody got that, but
Yeah.
people ask sometimes why you're budgeting for something that you're getting a grant for, and we have to budget for it.
Especially if we know about it.
I would actually like to make the motion that we fund it for the leasing, because one of the things that we have currently right here, it's already on the table, it's already in here as the purchasing it outright.
Okay.
There's no change.
Oh, okay.
Except for the direction of add the, grants and so forth, which I personally think that's just an obvious thing that the SAU should always be implementing. I think that the leasing option is the best for cash flow. Because what it's gonna do right here is, we see where we're starting out, $75 million right here. That's a big increase that we have right now that we're looking at. And I agree, we're taking some of this stuff off of here, and it's getting lower. What this is gonna do is that, in this proposal, it will turn around and free up about $150,000, actually more than that. And it gets to us to a better number. And you're turning around and you're paying for this, and you're gonna budget it accordingly over the next 5 years. And it would also become part of your operating budget. And since it's a contractual obligation, it would also become part of your default budget. But what it does is it's a cash flow thing. Are we gonna put all of our eggs in this one basket so that we can turn around and not do something else that we're gonna turn around and probably be discussing elsewhere? It's actually a potential to keep other projects that we're gonna be potentially looking to cut. And as we go down this road, the cuts that we're gonna make are gonna get harder and harder and harder. So let's turn around and give something right here, so you're actually now pre-buying something that we don't have to cut later on.
Would you like to make a motion to that effect?
Yes, I would. What was the number? It was 47,000. I didn't catch the,
For 5 year, it's 47,284.09.
47, so I'll make it for $48,000 for that project.
Okay. Is there a second? Need a second over here?
On the motion?
Yes.
Just a clarification on if we lease, are we eligible for any of the grant funding?
So if we lease, we are eligible for the grant funding. However, these grants are very progressive, especially the E-rate grants are very progressive. The one-time grant that we have an opportunity for through the state, I believe is just a one-time grant. When that grant's expired, that's expired, and that's it. I don't think that would go beyond more than 1 or 1.5 budget cycles, if you will, this being the first half of it. From an E-rate perspective, it seems likely there would be a chance to recoup the first 2 years. Beyond that, it's uncertain. So if it were a 3-year lease, you would run the risk of not being able to recoup those funds in the 3rd year. If it were a 5-year lease, you would run the risk of not being able, you'd be leaving the money on the table in years potentially 3, 4, and 5.
Yes.
With that, you could also design the lease arrangement with the lease company that you can accelerate the lease payout. I mean, yeah, you're contracted over the 5 years, and that's what you're obligated to, but you can have options in there that you can turn around and exercise during the life of that contract to accelerate the payments so that you can turn around and take advantage of any program that comes on up where you've got if you're gonna get a grant for $100,000, we should be able to have in that lease agreement the ability to prepay, just like on a mortgage. You can turn around, and if you paid $100,000 onto it, you're just not paying interest on $100,000, and it just would turn it around.
I don't have a question, but I was just gonna say that was one of the things we talked with Ken, that when he was here, was the buyout, make sure we had a buyout clause, so we wouldn't be hit with a penalty.
My only concern with the leasing is it's gonna cost us 21 grand more.
Maybe more, depending on the other part that I was just gonna bring up, is I don't know if 48,000 is enough if the rate goes up.
At 3.9 right
Yeah.
now.
And it's adjustable year over year.
No, they're usually fixed, but if you
It's
can get
fixed, but we don't know what the rate's gonna be in July.
Yeah, but it's not gonna, it's not like it's gonna jump to 8.
No, I'm not saying that,
Yeah.
and by no means am I saying that, I'm just saying that, the rate isn't fixed currently, because we're not in anything until July when we actually go and do this.
I mean, the same analogy could be used as why don't we all just buy our own houses and not take a mortgage out? It's because it's cash flow. We can't purchase our houses for the entire amount up front. If you can, God bless you.
So,
And then I just wanna make the will, at some point, you get to a point where you're asking us to make discretionary cuts, like, we need you to get to a certain number. Is the will of this board, that you either wanna buy this or lease it? Like, this wouldn't be somewhere you'd want me to look later when we're looking for more reductions. You'd wanna do one or the other? Am I reading that right? Is that the will of this group?
I think so.
'Cause obviously, that's a big number, that I was already looking at that number when I'm looking at the budget.
You're talking as a complete removal from
Correct.
the budget cycle.
From a ex-school administrator's point of view, you want it all in one lump sum, because it's not only convenient, you get what you're paying for right up front. I think what Mr. O'Neill is pointing out is, yeah, we're gonna pay some in interest at the other end, but it's gonna lessen the impact on the tax rate. And I'm, quite frankly, all about the tax relief for our taxpayers, period. So wherever we end up, to your point, Dr. Metzler, is that I think without polling this board, I think we're very cognizant of the fact of our taxpayers at this point.
The reason I asked that primarily is because whatever we end up taking out, you know, somebody wants in there. Somebody, maybe several of you. So just trying to get a feel for what are the things that are hands off? Like, we need that one way or the other, or not? Because I don't want to come back with a series of cuts that you're not comfortable with. It doesn't really help the efficiency of the process, if you would. Right?
So, based on what you've said, you know, I understand the need for this technology, but maybe it's something that can be removed from the budget and moved to a warrant article as a capital reserve that's funded over 2, maybe 3 years. Then, I don't know.
Whatever you want to go ahead, Julie.
My only comment on that is, and I would typically say, yes, let's push this out. The grants and the opportunity to recoup some money is the only reason why I'm hesitating on that, because if we put it off, those grants may not be available in a couple of years.
May I, before you?
Sure.
To that point, thank you. You're right. Can a warrant article be written in such a way that it makes it clear that we're potentially eligible for grants and it would be offset by that grant money?
Well, I don't know the answer to that because I'm not a warrant article expert, but I would say it's tricky because the articles are written by the school board.
Right.
Not the budget committee, one, and then
Correct.
I'm not sure what won't get approved and not approved. They're getting more and more sensitive to the language
Right.
that you put in those articles.
May I? That was gonna be my point,
Sorry.
which is when they do the warrant, when you raise and appropriate, and then you use all that other jargon, it basically is in there, where there may be offsets in there, but they don't tell the taxpayer in the warrant article that there may be
Yeah.
offsets. May I just go one further? When we talk about bonding or warrant articles, I think it's important that we realize whatever the date is of the big bond that we're paying. I asked Brian earlier, Brian Boyle, and he made it sound like 2019, Jeff, is that correct?
Bond will be up, I believe we go a little bit beyond that.
That was 20.
20?
Yeah, 20.
See, as a member of the CIP and person that was on the old committee that put the building program together, you don't want to mess around with a bond unless you're going for a chunk of money that you're pretty guaranteed that the constituency is going to actually look at, digest, and then you're going to do. Like, this would be a perfect example. If we had a strategic plan 2 years ago, and we're saying to the strategic plan, we want all the schools in this district under this bond to have all fiber optic. Period. That would be part of it, because we want everything that's in technology all tied in together. But we're not at that point. So once again, the horses are behind the cart. So you either pay for it and get it in place, or you go with the lease program. I think those are your only two choices.
We have a motion on the floor for a 5-year lease at $47,285.
Sean said 48.
48.
Went to 48.
He said 48.
Okay. So, for 48,000, that's correct, I'm sorry. So, I'd like to move the question. All in favor of this proposal? Opposed? Abstentions?
That was the count on that.
It was,
271.
yeah. Okay, so, the next step, I guess, is to work on the final.
Actually, I'm gonna make a motion.
Yep.
See if we get discussion. make a motion to remove BIT dash 0001 for $218,264 and recommend to the school board that it be moved to warrant article.
I'll second.
And so the thought process there is exactly what I was thinking. We put it to a warrant article, we can still leverage the opportunity for that grant money to offset the costs. And maybe it becomes a win-win. It's a risk, what the superintendent said, that's one of the areas he's looking, if we tell him, you gotta drop some more.
Okay.
So then there's a potential risk that it's gone entirely.
So it sounded to me like initially you were thinking maybe we could go on the warrant, and if the money were available, that it would be something that we would be able to go into, and it's binary. And so if the money is in there to be appropriated, I put it right into the full budget for the year to be appropriated. So if it's a different matter entirely if it's not spent, if the grant money isn't available for it, but it would still be included in the total, and we would be appropriating based on that. And in fact, if we appropriated it and didn't use it because we didn't have we didn't have grant offset in the revenue side, it would still become part of the tax.
Correct, we eat
Right.
100% of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay,
But I don't think that changes the opportunity that we have or our potential for winning the grant. Where it's included in the budget, whether it be in the operating budget or the warrant article, doesn't change the fact that we still have potential for our grant.
That's correct, and I think that the greatest chance, the greatest opportunity to maximize or optimize that grant is to have it in the current year, or the current year and the subsequent year. In the current contemplated year for budget purposes, or the year after, because after 2 years out, we're not certain whether it'll be included.
yes,
Mr. Superintendent, could you explain why you sort of felt like this might be one of those things that you might go after? So kind of give us a little more of your perspective, looking across everything in your head, of why you thought this might be something that we would be going after.
Yeah, I didn't say I would go after it, so I don't wanna leave that impression. I said these were things that I was looking at. I looked at, looking at every big number. Cause at the end of the day, when the bottom line number is, not something that people have an appetite to support, you have several choices. It's people and it's things, right? So, for me, people are more important than things, right? So I'm gonna try to protect the instructional staff we have in place. So I'm looking at big numbers that, or things that to help reduce the bottom line and try to stay away from the classroom as much as possible. And that really was as simplistic as an explanation as I could give you.
Okay.
Other than that, I'm curious about, because I know we have a motion on the floor, a warrant, does that impact the timing of applying for the grant? I mean, I can't imagine we'd be applying for grants with something on, that we hope might get supported, right? And we're writing a conditional grant application, like if this, then that, like if the warrant, or if the article passes, then can we be an applicant? I got a feeling if I'm looking at applications, that one's not gonna be on the top of my list, right? I'm gonna go to the places that have a plan in place. Because my understanding was, to be eligible for the reimbursement or whatever, you had to have a plan. Now, we have a plan because it's in the CIP. It would be even better if it was in a strategic plan, because we'd say, here's our CIP, which lines up with our strategic plan, but we have a plan. But if we don't have a plan, does that mean we wait to put in any applications for grants?
I think it'd be somewhat speculative at that point, and really depends on when the grant goes out, right? So if the grant were out sometime between the time that it were included in the budget and in the warrant, then
It wouldn't be any different than it would be in the operating budget. I mean, because this item would not be in the default budget. So it's based in
Maybe
March.
it's the same, yeah.
It's speculation that the operating budget passes.
Correct.
Speculation till the day after the vote.
Unless, of course, somehow, well, no. I mean, I don't know if you could include it somehow in your technology budget, like looking at your technology budget.
You could
if there was
repurpose
a-
money. I mean, it's a bottom line budget, so you
Yeah,
could
that's what I mean.
repurpose
If
it.
he found $218,264 and didn't buy something else in his technology budget, hardware. for
Correct.
hardware.
If he knew that he was gonna get, $200,000, for example, in a grant, you might turn around and say, yeah, we'll reallocate 218,000 because we're gonna get 200,000 to offset it. So it only costs us 18 grand. And I know I'm just using those numbers
Yeah,
to
no, good,
illustrate the point.
Good point. So that example I gave is probably not much different than a proposed budget versus a default budget, right? In terms of grant application, so.
Mr. Guide?
Lee, I see where you're coming from, but one of my main reasons for supporting this is something we can't discuss with the voters. So
And that's where I'm torn on it.
that's a problem for me, right? I mean, so if you pull this out in the warrant article, nobody knows, exactly why we're all supporting this, and that's a problem for me anyways, because I think that was a very valid reason.
Extremely compelling.
Okay. Any more, Mr. Doobie, would you restate your,
Yeah, it was to remove request ID BIT-0001, the amount of $218,264 from the proposed budget, and recommend to the school board that it be moved to warrant article.
okay, and there was a second. So, any further discussion? All in favor? Two, three, four, seven. Opposed? 1, 2, 3. Abstentions? One abstention.
Does that add up?
No, that doesn't add up.
Gets you to 11.
Yeah.
Who's double dipping?
Who voted for?
Let's go again. Go again in favor.
I'm gonna say a
Favor.
6-3-1.
All in favor?
That's what I think it was. Yeah, 6.
6.
6-3.
6, okay. Okay. Moving on to the middle school budget. Oh, wait, we have to vote on the full operations, business operation budget. A motion on the floor to accept the business operation budget as amended.
I'll make that motion.
Any second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? That's 900 for the record. Okay, now to the middle school budget.
I think that was 10.
900 doesn't add up.
Was it 10?
3,
Okay.
4, 5,
That's up to
6,
9.
7, 8, 9, 10.
Okay. Okay. The middle school budget. Are there any concerns about the middle school budget? I have one concern, and that's the account number 7272750, furniture, configurable student desks, like $55,425. This is a budget that was presented because the principal was new and had not gotten into the CIP process. And I would like to see that reduced by half and then have them do a CIP for the balance for the next couple of years. So I guess that's my motion, to reduce this 55,000 by half, which would be about 27,000. Change.
Second.
So,
Yep.
before you do that, I.
Oh, yeah, we got a second, now we're into discussion, so,
Before you move forward, I did make some adjustments to that line to do it on more of a phased approach.
okay.
And so that budget is actually, before we get into the final budget, final draft you have in front of you, was reduced. And which line were you citing? 'Cause it was in a couple different ones.
It was 100.1100.737.27.50.
Yeah, so that. dot 50, so I took that down into more of a phased-in approach. And a couple different ways to go quickly. Okay, so we had a number of items in there, and I took the entire line in a phased approach down by half before getting into the final budget that you have in front of you, the final draft budget that you have in front of you, so that has already been reduced by 32,187. So the draft one you have in front of you, total budget, consolidated budget, that is reflected in that. We'd had some discussions
Okay.
on that.
So you've taken 32,000 off of what we have here?
Correct, and more specifically out of that account that we just talked about, yep.
Okay, so their proposed budget then would be, their proposed budget has been reduced to 347,000, 625. Okay. Original proposed in the document we have here that they presented at their presentation is 375, 625. We're reducing that by $32,000 to bring it down to 347, 625.
Now, you also have a motion on the floor, I believe, to do the same thing.
Yes, that's basically what my motion is.
Withdraw that?
Huh?
Do you want to withdraw it since it seems it's already done?
Sure, yeah. Okay.
If I knew you were gonna make that motion, I filled off you some lottery numbers, or.
Any other discussion? Yes.
This budget, even with that 347, 625, is still up 28%, right? That's a significant increase. Going from the number that Jeff just read,
So we're taking this under advisement because we're gonna be working on this over the next few weeks.
Maybe I'd like to recommend that maybe we should look at this as a different approach. Instead of us trying to figure out, in this case, what are the 28%, what is the critical stuff that the principal needs
Yeah,
there?
that's-
We need more of advisement from him to what would be the best, and any of these people that oversee their respective departments. We should probably be looking at least from my viewpoint, an overall number. I mean, the school board came in here, the two representatives of the school board, and told us what the direction would be from the school board of a reduction of roughly, $2 to $3 million. And what, we're starting out here is something that's the totally opposite of that. So now we have like a $7 million swing that we're trying to close or discuss and debate. And we probably have to turn around and look at it as a different approach, because I think we're not even gonna get close to where we
Yeah,
probably wanna
we're
be.
just establishing a starting point. Because I know we're gonna be coming back to this when we start to discuss the main budget, and we make cuts accordingly. Yes?
I agree with Mr. O'Neill 100%.
Okay.
We're making tiny changes on stuff that we're not the experts on. I think we'd be better off with better use of our time, kind of getting a sense of where the board thinks we should be for a total number or percent, and then going back to administration, say, here, we're not gonna make these cuts, because we don't know. As I said in our last meeting, I don't wanna go cut crayons, pencils, or markers. I don't know which one's more important. But if we can be going through this for the next 3 hours, and then at the end, somebody might say, I wanna make a motion to move the budget to a certain number.
So, yeah, what are we doing?
What are we doing? And so, we're over here cutting things about, trees and vacuum cleaners and bathrooms, are we really the best ones? I'd prefer to start narrowing it down to the number where we think we might want it, and then give that to the administration, and they can make the cuts where they see fit. But to go through what we're doing now, we can go through it, but I don't think it's the best use of our time.
So I'd like to actually make a motion that this board adopts what the school board is proposing, or the recommendation of the cut in the range of $2 to $3 million.
I'll second
From
that
the
motion.
2018 budget, you
So
said.
pardon?
But the number of the 71,759 number.
Yes, from the current
Current
budget.
yeah.
Correct,
Not the
yes.
proposed that we have currently on the table right now.
I'll second that motion right now.
So you were,
Can you repeat that?
yeah. Well, first off, we have to table or do something with this one item. Get this
Table.
off the table.
Table.
Okay,
Okay.
all right, so we will not discuss any more of the other budgets that are still, that we put on the parking lot at this point.
That's my philosophy. I mean,
All right. Is that the consensus of the committee?
That's his,
Not to,
that's his
yes,
motion.
I just had one comment. What about if we approach this, could we get, what is the, maybe approaching it, instead of saying we're gonna take that off, how about we get a number, a fixed number of the absolutely non-negotiable items, the, transportation, as well as we can estimate it. I know there's a new contract coming up. Retirement, insurance, special ed, the items that are just
teachers' contracts.
things like that that are there. What is that number? Does anybody know what that number is?
I can get you in the ballpark.
Okay.
A flat budget, last year's budget, minus one-time expenses, plus all the contractual, is gonna put you somewhere in the 73.5 million. That's where the number, where the default budget, if done correctly, will be about. That's where it's gonna be.
is that currently funding all positions that are currently?
That's
In
funding the
place.
positions that are, all the positions are filled, we don't have open positions, so if we have retirements or people leave, that's something different. The other thing that you need to understand is administrative positions, that in this particular district, they're super teachers. So any administrative position I eliminate, that person goes back in the classroom, displaces one, maybe two teachers, and we have to pay underemployment because we're privately insured. There's no savings there. That's something people don't understand.
Can you repeat that again?
If we were to remove, I'll just say, for instance, a dean. Dean's a super teacher, they're protected. They go back into the classroom, displaces one, maybe two, because a lot of times we have to lay off two to get the savings for one. And then we have to pay underemployment because now they're underemployed in terms of the money they're making next year versus this year. So we don't save any money. And you displace a couple of teachers. So I'm stuck in terms of, because we look at people, again, as currency in a sense, because we're $6.5 million apart. Let's not make this a mystery. We're talking a lot of people.
Correct.
A lot of people. We're talking, I probably have to pink slip 100 people to get there.
If we've overhired wrong and we're overstaffed, we shouldn't be penalized. We're gonna keep this train rolling because we're overstaffed?
We're not
That makes no
overstaffed.
sense.
We're not overstaffed.
Well,
We're absolutely not overstaffed.
I mean,
We have, unless you
I-
change the class
I
size,
agree with that.
we're not overstaffed unless you change the class size.
so, I mean, I think we're overstaffed and we keep heading down that road. Now, we're at the point now where we can't reduce because it's gonna negatively affect, and that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, you wouldn't have to necessarily bring a dean back into the classroom, you could eliminate the position.
They go back to the classroom, they're super teachers. They're protected
What's
by
that
the
term?
union.
So now we're caught in a situation where
What
we
if,
have to stop the
what if
budget.
you eliminated the position, if the
confused.
position of a dean no
Really
longer
confused.
existed? They have to,
They get a teacher
they
position.
have to, okay,
And then you pay underemployment for the money that the differential in salary.
okay.
I'd like to go back to Mr. O'Neill's motion.
Yeah, you had a motion.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
And it was seconded.
He
What's-
seconded it.
I did.
Can I have a question, inquiry? Other than, I understand the school board had proposed that number and polled about it. Other than that, is there a sort of particular reason that's the number as opposed to 2.5 or 4 or whatever?
I think that's what they're starting out as of right now. They might decide to change that, and I would just like to turn around and sort of follow their lead, because if they are reducing positions and eliminating them, then there's no sense for this board to turn around and fund those positions. If they decide to turn around and go against your recommendation, Dr. Metzler, and remove those deans, which they have, then we should not be here funding them in their entire amount.
So I need to understand exactly what you're proposing.
Yeah, I need, what was the motion again? 'Cause I'm
What was
still
the
a little-
motion?
Is to support, you wanna go, what I said?
Motion to adopt the recommendation of the school board to cut 3%, about 2 million off the operating budget.
Correct.
Which
The
year?
current operating budget.
The current operating budget,
Current.
not the proposed one.
2018
The
budget.
2018 budget.
So can I paraphrase then? Just to, I wanna make sure I'm 100% clear. So we want to adopt an initiative or a direction that establishes a 2018-2019 operating budget that is 3% lower than the 2017-2018 operating budget of $71,759,415.
Correct.
Jeff, you gotta give them the number.
It would appear to me to be about 69,606,230 $230-ish.
Say it again?
1,759
I had it right here.
times 637.
Number two.
Yep, 69,606, 633.
I still have my question. Are we still in a discussion phase?
Yes.
Not to change the subject, I asked 10 questions on a memo to Jeff last time we met, for the express purpose, so we could go ahead and look at the trends versus the enrollment trends. And I really feel that we need to be prudent with every dollar that we're going to say we're raising on the revenue side. And I'm not saying anything negative about anything that's gone on before me. This is my first rodeo. But I also know that there are some people that are hurting out in this district, that I think we have to address that and be responsible for the tax rate in our district on all 4 towns. Agree?
Okay, point taken. When I raise the question, we also have a responsibility to the children and young adults in our school system.
Granted.
And I would be very interested to see or to hear what the impact would be on the educational environment of this drastic change.
I think the drastic changes from 16 to 2018, I'm looking at $6 million. I think that's a drastic change.
6 million?
Was it 64 million? Almost say 65, we want to round up. In 16, am I correct in saying that?
That's how this-
And now we're looking at, with 2018, that's almost $7
Yeah,
million.
but there's been some changes since.
Well, I'm telling you, we might be going a little too quickly
Yeah.
for what we can support in our district. And in my town, I know that's for a fact, Sandown. There's no doubt. So, I know we're all here for the kids, and I grant you that. And there's some safety items, the fiber optics, I'm all for that. But we gotta find a way to spend that within reason. So, saying we're gonna, back to his motion, I'd like to know where we are. I'd like to see, I know where I land.
We turned around, and if you look at this is the budget of 2017. We have the numbers that expended. This just closed last June. We spent $64 million out of a $70.4 million budget.
That's not accurate.
Not entirely, no, that's not.
67.
Spend 67, we'll probably spend 69 this year, probably 71 next year. To do this, to operate at the same level we're operating now.
So you're saying in 1 year you went up $5 million from
2
64?
million, 67 to 69 to 71, 2 million a year it goes up about. And those are the non-negotiables, that's like the teacher's contract, the health insurance, the dental insurance, those sorts of things. The spending, not what we spent.
Yes.
So one of the things that I brought up last time, and I'm gonna bring it up again, 100% here, have heard from people concerns about the dollars increasing. 100%, we have to be teaching our children as best we possibly can afford to do. There's a balance. When these things happen, you have to have a prioritization process. Every year, for the some 30 years that I've lived here, this is what I've seen. It's a swing between the two in the absence of a prioritization process. And you end up arguing about things in a vacuum. Both are true.
Pendulum swings both ways.
And both are true,
It isn't
but we
just
can do it
errors.
with some logic,
Mhm.
right? And so, as we discuss this, I would like to come back to whatever we all decide is the appropriate target or whatever. That a challenge, request of folks in SAU land to provide us with, to amplify what you were saying, Julie, it's that what are the pieces that are falling in this priority we can't touch? How much is that? It's amorphous, always, and it needs to not be amorphous. Then there's a piece that we have some conversation around. Let's have the conversation around that part and how much we want to reduce that part by. Instead of this, draconian cut, can't keep staff. That's where we end up every time. And I, for one, I appreciate both sides, but I see the only path forward is if we go back to prioritization process that I've never seen done. Maybe it's happened, but I've not seen it. So, I've had my spiel.
I have a question for Jeff.
Yes.
So, if I look at the 2017 expended, my paper says 64.2 million, but you said the number was,
C7, it's the way that we report, and you'll see that this is just reporting on the 100 fund.
Doesn't include transportation or food service.
Federal projects, food service. Our federal
why wouldn't
projects.
we include them in here? When we were looking at our,
Well, we do include them in. We include them. Let me just grab a current.
whatever the reason is, it makes it challenging when I look at this summary page that was part of our packet.
It does, yeah.
And when it says 2017 expended, is not what we expended, it's something else, for whatever the reason is.
I can put in what we've spent on the other funds as well, on the bottom on the transfers. That really just shows the 100 fund expenditures where I have not included it in what we call the fund transfers. So I can put those figures in and get a more true number. It's difficult because we really report on our 100 fund. Our 210 fund is food service, 220 fund is federal projects.
Can I make it simple?
Please.
I said, don't put all these on, just I want to know the total amount that we wrote checks for.
67.
Yeah, I got that now, but when I read it at home, I thought it was
I know.
64. So, going forward, can we just have the absolute numbers? So if I keep that in mind, that 2017 is really 67 and change, are any of these other numbers on the, not what they are as printed?
Okay. So in your packet, there is you'll see a 2018, 2019 budget recap
Yes.
by object code.
Got it.
Those feature those fund transfers in the spend. And this schedule is put together for that purpose, to incorporate those expenditures under one roof, if you will.
Okay.
So that's where you'll find those numbers, those figures.
So everything else seems to line up, 219 proposed, 218 budget, et cetera, going down. So the only one that I see changed really is the 2017 expended,
16 expended as well.
and 16 expended, yes.
Yeah.
The tax base can't.
Yep,
So those are where those numbers are included.
got it.
Jeff, that bottom line offset by revenue, though? So there's matching revenue for that.
Correct. Still an expenditure, though.
It's an expenditure, but it is offset with revenue.
Correct.
So it's a wash.
Not from an expenditure perspective, but it is a wash from a tax.
Income and outflow.
Correct. From a tax rate setting perspective, yes.
Yeah, I guess, we don't ask for money that we have revenue to offset.
Yep.
So the bills to the town is reduced by that.
Correct.
Yeah.
So if we were looking at a true expenditure without the offset revenue, it's what's in the larger packet. If you're looking at what's offset with, what is offset with revenue.
You got it, correct.
Yes.
All I can see is the bottom line, the way I look at it, we're going up $2 million a year for the for the future to come. Our tax base can't support that. So it doesn't matter what we spent, the bottom line is we have to look at that number going forward. We have to plan, she says draconian, but I say it's what we have to do. I mean, we can't keep going on this pace. It's just not gonna work. We don't have, our tax base doesn't support it. That's it, bottom line. Doesn't matter, that's the way I look at it. So,
Yeah, I agree. It's, we're really serving two different populations. We're serving the children and what's in their best interest, and we're serving the constituency and what's in their best interest. And they're not always gonna align.
correct.
And it gets to a point now, where you look at Sandown, I'm only gonna speak to Sandown, a tax rate of $30.78 per thousand. You're going to see people leave, you're gonna see houses that aren't selling because of that high tax rate, you're gonna see foreclosures, and that just increases the tax burden on the individual
They're left.
owners.
Correct.
So it's, hey, I like steak and lobster tails, but at some point I have to sell the
I
dog.
don't get to
if
eat
I
them
wanna
that much.
continue to fund that.
They're too cheap.
And to add on to this, as you all know, I'm also a selectman in my town. We also deal with the constituents paying for that. We hear the issues of having hardships, being able to pay for it. And one of the things the district does is they know every month 4 checks are coming in. 100% guaranteed, gonna come in, there's no cash flow issue. You know what, when people have problems, they're not paying their taxes. The towns have got to absorb that and prepare for it accordingly. There's a lot, and we're all, like I said, several weeks ago, we're all competing here, local level, county, everything else. We're all competing for the same tax dollars you can only tax people so much, and we're all competing for it.
All right, so this is a question I want to give to Dr. Metzler. The school board made some kind of, they stated their opinion to knock the budget down by 3%, 2 million, right? So if this overall budget goes down a couple million, 3 million, can you just describe the effect? What will take place?
Oh, are you talking the 69,606,633 number?
Yes.
We're looking at about 100 people laid off.
Keep going, so that means catastrophic.
That means increased class size. I mean, I have to look throughout the budget, to Ms. Doobie's point, I was looking at large numbers, because I'm trying to maintain the instructional staff. I mean, there'll be measurable damage in this district, in terms of student achievement, in terms of what we can offer, in terms of programs and sorts of things. It'll be that kind of reduction. I would say anything south of, I'm not gonna say the 73.5 number, but I would say you get into the 72.8, 72.5 number, you start getting below that, we start to see considerable damage done to the district, as you know. So the 69.6 number, like I said, I'm just roughing that out, looking at some of the reductions in that, and I say, you gotta remember, we pay the unemployment, so it's not as simple as, I'm giving you a rough estimate about, you're looking at about 100 pink slips at that number.
I would like to then forward this one off to maybe Mr. Guide and Dr. Metzler. So the school board's rationale on this, meaning that if they're saying a number of this size, they know the consequences, because I'm sure it was shared in the meeting. Their follow-up response is,
Consequences were not discussed. That was just a mandate. That was just they just threw that out there. There wasn't any discussion. There wasn't any thought behind it. It was just 3%.
I kinda wish,
There was no discussion. You can watch it. It's on film, right? No discussion.
guide, are they aware?
I don't know, to be honest. The number was thrown out, it was discussed very briefly, not a lot of time invested into
Okay.
it.
I know you have a motion on the floor, and I apologize. We have a meeting November 30th. What I would like to do is not take too much action to do anything drastic without knowing, well, I heard the consequences from Dr. Metzler. I want to make sure the school board, I want to understand from the school board what they understand before I throw my head anywhere.
Well, we're meeting 30th, we're meeting?
Yeah,
with
we're
them?
meeting on the 30th.
Next week?
What happens? Yes.
As part of that, often there are options. You could do this, a little of this, some of that. It comes back to that prioritization I was talking about. So in preparation for that conversation, I'd like to ask Dr. Metzler and Mr. Dowd if you guys can put together some options, a range, so that as we have those conversations, there's some understanding of, one option over here is, laying off 100 people or so, what the impact on that is, but there are potentially other options.
Yeah.
I don't know what those are, that's where you guys would come in.
Can't use those numbers.
Go ahead.
And I would respectfully act before people just throw out a number without any thought to what it means, zero thought. And then you tell them what it means, and they quickly go, oh, those are just scare tactics. They're not, that's the reality. It's either people, or it's the rest of the resources.
Or some mix,
Or
and that's
some
where I'm
mix.
saying what the options are.
But the lion's share of this budget is people.
That's right.
So that's a big number. You don't get to big numbers. You saw what you're trying to do. You're whittling down at 10 and 15 at a pop, you're not going anywhere.
Right.
Not going anywhere. It's people.
I mean, I see a lot of the cost administrative right now. I mean, some of the administrations was up. I mean, I just don't see it's warranted. That's what I'm saying. And to say that 2 million, we were back, we survived at $70 million, $70,464,017. Now you're telling us you can't survive until you get to 72.5 or 73. In 2 years.
I said level funded, the system
I
as you
get
know
that,
it.
but I don't get the math, and I'm not saying it's a scare tactic, and when you say 100, I just don't agree with it. So, and I think that we should have I'll give you a message where we need to be.
100 is a conservative number. I'm dividing the number by 80,000, and you need to lay off 2 to get the savings of 1. It's people that don't understand the business.
Well, okay, well, I don't understand the business, but I do know if we don't start cutting now, we'll never get there. Okay, so we can't get the savings we want now, but 2 years from now, 3 years now, we'll realize the savings.
We have a
Unemployment's
motion.
done. So, I mean, I get what you're saying, and it's a cost of, it's gonna be a cost to us, but we gotta stop it somewhere. And I know it's people's livings, and I get that, but there's only so much we can spend in the district. If you're telling me your business model is to go up $2 million a year for the next 10 years, that to me makes no sense. We can't do that. We have to start being responsible to our constituents and be able to afford, living. I mean, I don't wanna, I'm fine, but there's people in Sandown that can't afford it, and that's the bottom line, so.
And to add to this, one of the things that with this bond coming on off in a couple of years, we see some of the stuff that we're talking about with strategic planning that they're gonna potentially have to do. I would suspect that this district would be going out for another bond. If you're gonna turn around and $2 million plus an increase per year, and then a couple of years from now, you're gonna try to ask the voters for a bond, and you need 60% of a vote to carry that, you're, I think, delusional to think that that's gonna pass. I mean, it's just, at least this is showing us you're taking a step back. And then as we start going on up, when you get to that point, you might be able to actually get it, because then now it's the cost of that bond would be probably about the same amount that they would be reabsorbed back into it. So we probably would get in there and then you could get the bond passed.
Michael, and then,
So your motion right now is to follow the school board's recommendation opinion.
Yes, their directive.
So if we do that, that's a fixed move. Right,
it's a
I
starting
don't know if I'm
point.
ready to do that, but I do want to.
It's a
starting point.
This, we would go through the budget process.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask Mr. O'Neill, would you consider withdrawing and then bring that motion up again on the 30th after we hear from a school board? So, because we're working as pairs.
I would actually like to, we can change this at any given time, all the way up until the public hearing.
Right.
We could turn around and agree to this original proposed number at the public hearing at the end, and we just basically accomplished nothing through this whole process. We have that right as a board. What I like to do is to say that we are supporting as the budget committee, so it also allows the school board to know where we stand.
Good point.
So, I agree, we need to take steps to reduce the budget. Looking at the information we have, I don't know that the 3% is the right number, or at least I don't know that I feel comfortable with it. Here's why I say that, just back of napkin math, right? If we look at the recap sheet that we have, the top section are what I would call the non-negotiables, right? Those are the salaries, those contractual obligations, social security, et cetera. So 2018, and even there my math is still a little bit off, I would use the 2018 number by mistake. That's $52 million, right?
Yep.
And then if we go back 2 budget cycles from where we're planning to 17 actual expended, what I would term the negotiables, that was 18.3. That brings us to a baseline of 70.4.
Wait, can you, I got.
Yeah.
Can you just repeat all that again?
Exactly, yeah. So the non-negotiables, 2018 budget, because I was looking at the wrong
The
column.
52,
Is 52 million, right?
52,107.
That's non-negotiable, that's set in stone. Then if we take the negotiables and look 2 budget cycles back, the 17 cycle, the actuals there were 18.3.
You lost me on that.
Yeah,
number.
Yeah, where's
Look at
the,
the bottom.
Jump to the
Look at
next
the bottom.
column.
thank you, very
where's he
good.
going?
Oh,
Okay,
got it,
gotcha.
yeah.
Where's he
So
going?
that's
So he's saying, like,
18.3 plus
like
the
just an example,
52.1
that's what we actually
gets you to
expended.
70.4.
But you still, yeah,
Maybe like-
I guess what I'm gonna do is just make the point that, Mr. O'Neill, we have something on the table. If we vote it down, we vote it down. If we vote, yes, let's support the school board, then let's support the school board, and we can start there for a discussion with those folks, why they're doing it, and then if we have to go back and add things, I'm fine with that, but
So our baseline number is 69.
I just,
Six,
I
33,
know
I
what the
think it is.
tax impact is in my town for retired people. I also have heard from the other towns. I guess I'm empathetic to the taxpayers in our district, and I want to be put on record that I think today needs to be the day we have the discussion. Are we going to continue to go upwards, or are we going to take a step back and say, what is realistic for our,
What can we support as a district,
exactly.
as taxpayers?
Our job would be so easy if we could just turn around here and say, yeah, we approve the $75.1 million.
Right.
And pretty much everybody's in a unanimous decision, and we're all done. See you at deliberative. But we know that that's not the case here, and it's gonna be a drastic impact. We know that we're gonna turn around as we're in a declining enrollment. The state's gonna be contributing less to this, which is this, even at the same exact budget that we had. Our budgets our tax rates will, and the amounts will go on up just from the amount that we're gonna receive less from the state, because we're in a declining enrollment, and the students that are gonna get charged, that we're gonna see next year, are gonna be the current kids that are in the school district this year. And it's less than it was last year.
Right.
Those are facts.
Okay, there is a motion on the floor. And once again, there's been a lot of discussion since it was made, so I'll ask for it to be reread again so we understand what we're voting on.
Motion to adopt the recommendation of the school board to cut 3%, about $2 million, off the current operating budget for this school year for the proposed budget, 18-19.
Just
Is that
which is
the,
69, hold on,
69,606,633.
Yes.
correct.
So if this motion passes, what are we gonna do for the rest of the night?
Well, we're gonna review the budget that the paperwork that we got. And we're gonna start to look at this on a detailed level to see if there's any adjustments we need to make further in the next meeting.
I don't think.
That's my
It
point.
wouldn't be fruitful,
Yeah.
because we're issuing a directive to,
To redo these numbers.
We're gonna go through
Yeah.
pennies when we're asked to go in the direction of the school board, which is millions.
Right.
But the thing is, we will have also information on the educational effect of this change, if it's approved.
Yeah, but
And we may wanna tweak it some more. Go ahead.
We don't have, line item veto power. Basically, the bottom line that we give the superintendent is what the bottom line is. It's up to him how he
Wants to
and
disperse
Jeff
that
want
money.
to fill in those buckets, so to speak, and those line items. Once we're at that point, and we go to deliberative session, we're really out of the picture.
correct.
You would basically have X amount, and that if it was voted in March, I guess what I'm getting at, the impact of that is what we're asking from you.
let's just call the question.
Okay, move the question. All in favor? Raise your hands. One, two, three, four, five, six, seven. Opposed? One, two, three, four.
It's too many.
6-4.
No, it's
Six and
6-4. So at this point, I motion we adjourn, there's really not much to talk
No,
about.
no, wait. So,
I'm sorry, I apologize.
no, don't apologize. That's what I was asking before, so, this motion passed. You said we may go through and still knock off tens and $15,000, and I'm saying, is that the best use of our time? I'll sit here and do it.
No, I'd say we skip budget item, agenda item 8, which is budget discussion, and move on to administrative reports,
Okay.
reports of committees.
So let me, no, you're fine. What I'd really like to recommend, Mr. Guy, is the school board comes back with their best explanation of why they went with this number to justify it. Meaning, did they hear Dr. Metzler's opinion of the effects? And why are they okay with it, and how do they plan to succeed going forward with that number? I'd like to hear more information. It's too bad.
Well, see, that's the whole point. If we could get more information.
So that's what I want. Please have them
we
come
have more
prepared
information
on November 30th.
On the
you black up the
impact.
Does that make sense?
You give them a line budget and that's it.
You know,
So you're giving
if
us a
we're-
couple of days to figure out, because we got Thanksgiving, and we're back to work on Monday.
I'm asking the school board.
Yeah, they're not
We
gonna do
meet
it.
for an hour
Yeah.
for that 30th
If
meeting.
I'd like to, actually, I have a topic that I think we could talk about, and it's the transportation contract. We have in here like, almost $600,000 increase. And we have the contract that's in the process of an RFP. I don't know if it's gone out yet, where it's actually,
They hired a consultant to work on an RFP.
all right, so that increase of, I don't have to look up, but between 500,000 and 600,000, what is that, how is that based on? Is that,
Industry standard, that's what the cost, that, with our current contract, we ran it in somewhere between 15 and 20% increase on the next contract is what the industry standard will look like. If we come in under that, that'd be great. I asked the school board, privately, not publicly, I asked them, I said, typically on a renewal of a 5-year contract like that, if I could have probably negotiate with the current company and come back with a contract that's less than that increase, but they wanted to go out to bid. You go out to bid, they're bidding against nobody, that number will be higher most likely. That's the fact, right? So I probably, would it be about a 7 or 8% increase or so? But it would be the same company and it would be the same service, which we've determined we want to go out and see if we're hoping we can get a better service for less. We're hoping, but our logic tells us that the industry standard in terms of who will bid and what they can provide, we're hoping that our consultant, that expert in the field, will be able to look at our routes and look at our efficiencies and help us with that. But we still have to budget for it. We can't put something out to bid that we can't pay for.
I do agree, but it's potentially is that you can turn around and over budget for it, and then it's gonna come in, and then, of course, it's a bottom line budget, so if you turn around and you have $300,000 that's left over in that contract, then some of these other projects that you might wanna do, not wanna do, it's really discretionary. It's up to the board and yourself to turn around and you have access to that fund.
That would be ideal.
Correct.
What I'd like to see, you asked for, as we did last year, you asked for a number for which you could work with and crank, and we've just given you one. And I'd like to see you come up with another one of this next draft number 2 that will reflect what we just voted on. And we get an idea of what exactly has been, how you've met it. And if you if you come in with if you suggest, all right, we came in at 69.8 or something like that, okay, and you come up with a number and you've cut it and you've made your changes and it comes out at 69.1, is this, then we would have to decide if that's acceptable or not and why. We need to have, this is the information we're asking for the impact of giving you this bottom line number. Because I don't understand what the impact is gonna be, and I need to see what it's gonna do. I think we owe it to the voters to be able to say, all right, we reduced it as per request by this amount of money, and this is the impact, and this is what, and this is what it'll mean to the education to your children. I think the voters need to know that for deliberative. Yes?
So minus the holidays, this doesn't give the administration a lot of time, so how much time do you think you'd need to get an adequate summary?
I can't guarantee you that I'll have this done by the 30th for that joint meeting.
Because if we
I
don't
cannot
have
guarantee
it,
that.
if we don't have it, then our meeting isn't going to be
Well,
fruitful.
It'll be the same as last year, it'll be,
Yeah,
if we haven't had time.
we will meet with the board, the school board, because that's what we've agreed to do.
this
and
number.
That'll be the end of it.
This number was not just dropped on out tonight here. It was, the school board chair indicated 6 weeks ago. This number has not been just randomly come up by this board. It's been floated around here, and
Yes,
if
but
that,
they've not discussed the impacts and
Well,
what they want changed.
if you had a directive from the school board to turn around and reduce it by 3%, and you haven't turned around and ascertained the effect on that in 6 weeks, then shame on you.
Well, we'll have we've committed to meet with the school board on the 30th,
Correct?
and we will do that. But what this probably means is that we will probably not have a regular business meeting afterwards, because we will not have the information we need to discuss. We have a meeting scheduled on the 14th, which we could conceivably review that number, and vote again to make that the item that's gonna go into the public hearing, and then we'll be done.
Jeff, do you recall any directive from the school board to produce a budget?
Budget
No
committee.
directive.
It's the budget
Whole
committee.
straw, like, we'd like to see, maybe, let's see what the budget committee, there was no directive, so let's not mislead the public to say there was a directive to come back with a 3% cut.
It was
a
on the
hope.
table, Dr. Metzler. And if you haven't thought about that in 6 weeks, then like I said, shame on you then.
Shame on you, because it's not a directive. So you can't just make up directives and tell everybody
not
there's a
making
directive,
it
there was no
up.
directive.
It was
We are
actually
looking
on
at the
camera.
budget,
Watch the
we're
video.
looking at the budget with the budget committee, and putting the budget together. And so now you've asked for an awful lot of work in a short period of time, and we said we can't guarantee that we'll have that for you on the 30th.
Is the 14th of December doable?
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna try to have it for the 30th, but, I like to give you guarantees and then have people disappointed, and then everybody call it scare tactics, because they don't like what it means, right? That's what they do.
Well, my suggestion then would be to bring draft number 2 on the 14th. That'll give you time to crank the numbers and look at it. But I agree, I have gotten no direction officially from the school board. As the chairman of this committee, I have gotten no direction from the school board about what their desires were. Okay, what they wanted to like to see from us what their concerns were. And so, you know, for me, this was rumor.
There's
And
not a
I-
single directive in 6 years that I have not met from the school board. So shame on you for trying to make it look like it was a directive that I didn't meet. Dan's right here, ask him, ask him. There's a school board right here, ask him.
Dan does not represent the school board.
Absolutely does.
Here I do.
Absolutely does, so you don't understand, because he's the representative from the school board.
There was
Agree
no
to
vote
disagree,
taken.
Dr. Metzler.
It was a
You're wrong.
consensus.
I'd also like to bring on up is that I did have a conversation with Jeff about producing the income side statement of the budget, because we're also gonna have to turn around and produce that as well. So we can see where their offsetting revenues is, so that we can see what the impact is. And he said that you'd be able to do that, what, in a week or two?
After this budget was complete.
Okay.
Now it's a lot more work, so in terms of meeting with program directors and all of that, it's a lot. So I'll see what I can do, certainly.
Any other discussions on this? All right.
I have one.
Yes.
I'm gonna tell you something we all know, but we're all on the same team. Tough decisions and feelings get out there. But in the end, I'm just gonna keep telling you, we're on the same team. We're trying to do what's best and we have difference of opinion.
True.
Any other things? We'll go down to step 9, which is the administrative report. Is there one?
Nope.
Okay. Budget committee. Members have anything? Yes.
So, as a mini report from the Plastow Building Committee members, we had a constituent coffee this past weekend. We had 3 residents who attended, and a variety of topics came up over the 2 hours. I thought it was a really nice, small group, but a nice group. Relevant to the conversation tonight, queries were made of folks, sort of what their feeling was about the number, and there was a range, so people had sort of a range between 1.5 million under, all the way to 2 over. So that was kind of in that small sampling, the range that folks had shared. Other general feedback that were perceptions that this small group had, of opportunities, things to think about, some efficiencies in terms of how IEPs are managed, and we could always talk offline about any of these, or some of the busing that we've been talking about was also discussed. There were some concerns about the feeling that the administration and the costs associated with that in the schools and in the SAU, and some of the issues around that were expressed. So sort of as a kind of, those were the main bullet points. I don't know if you guys had anything else that you'd want to make sure that I missed in that you want to bring up.
It was a productive meeting.
Yeah, I thought it was nice. I thought it was really nice to sit and have this little conversation.
After she's all done, I have a different,
That was the update on constituent coffee. A little reminder, the strategic planning,
November 27th,
and the 27th,
Sandown North.
6:30, right?
Mhm.
In Sandown North. So be there if you want to have your voice heard.
Rebecca, at that meeting, actually, I brought it up. I think it'd be a good idea if we can get some cable TV time. Remember I said, what I asked the guests who came to that constituent coffee is, go tell your colleagues, your friends, your neighbors to voice their concerns to, what is it, budget chair, or chair at, budget chair? What's your email? budgetcom_chair@comcast.net. To have people, whatever their thoughts and feelings are, get them in, so we just have more input from whoever they are. Can we get that on the 10 network? Just a simple one line? Can you put that request in? That
Will
way,
you- Someone gonna email? Are you-
Yeah,
will you email me?
to my budget committee email.
Okay.
Yeah.
yeah, And so the next part I've been doing is, because, you know, I asked this question to the 3 guests that we had. And when I go around to anybody I see, I ask them that unbiased question. I don't want to feed it, you know, in one direction. It's, what do you think the voters would want? Because I'm going to tell you, when I sit in this seat, I'm not voting for, you know, Michael Maskell at my home address and what do I want. I'm the representative to the town, so I'm trying to get a sense for anybody who's in Plastow to reach out, give me your feedback, because I'm trying to vote for the best interest of the voters. That's who I represent. I don't represent me in my home on Pollock Road. That's not what it's about. So I'd really like to see more feedback come into this board from the community.
School board rep.
We hit pretty much all of them. Julie, you asked about the curbing removal, asked me to ask them. Well, Brian, the chair, had said, well, 1 year curbing's in, 1 year's curbing's not in. He says it changes all the time. So some years, he said in his experience that curbing is, the insurance companies don't want it. He says it could be 2 years later and, we want curbs back. So he says it happens, and they don't have whatever, you know, the facilities guy at Primex wants, that's what they're gonna go with, so, whether it's curbing or no curbing, from the insurance company. And that's it.
Okay.
We did everything else that I have on there, as we did it.
Is there any other business to come before this board?
I do, I just have a question.
Yeah.
And it was raised to me by a parent, and I wasn't aware whether it was actual truth to it or not. But our students that participate in instruction that's outside of the district, so they go to Pinkerton or they go to Salem, we reimburse them travel costs and other, do we give them a stipend? Do we give them any kind of reimbursement? This parent seemed to indicate that, yeah, they pay for their parking, uniforms, textbooks, etc.
Sometimes. Can depend, we do have students in certain CTE programs, and I believe we receive reimbursement from the state on some of those costs.
So is it possible that we can get a roll-up of how much student reimbursement costs we had for those types of programs last year?
Possibly.
So for example, this parent had a child, I think it was nursing, going down to Salem? A nursing program in Salem or a teaching program in Salem, some program at Salem High.
Yeah.
And she would travel there and use her car, and she was reimbursed for all that. So I want to see a roll-up of how much are we actually spending on those type of reimbursable activities in a year.
Okay. Let's see if I can get that for you.
And conversely, would you want to see how much money that's money going out, how much we're getting in?
Yes.
Meaning somebody who's coming here and we're receiving money.
Yes, sir.
As well as the
Right where I was
state
going.
reimbursement.
Correct.
I believe that would be on the income statement that I think you're gonna provide.
Yeah, I just want to know if offering this as an option to our students, is it costing us $100,000 or offsetting it 100% by revenue? State funding.
Okay. Any other business? All right, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
So made.
Second,
Second.
all in favor? Okay, thank you very much.